The first explosion didn't shake the island, it exposed it. Deep beneath the Pacific, where maps once showed nothing but blue emptiness, steel tanks groaned under pressure they were never meant to bear. The men working below ground froze, listening, knowing that if the enemy ever learned what lay beneath their boots, the war would tilt on its axis. To the outside world, the island was a forgotten coral scar, sun-bleached runways, a few fuel drums, a sleepy outpost barely worth a footnote. But below the surface, carved into volcanic rock, was something unprecedented. A fuel fortress so vast it could feed an ocean-spanning war. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Rourke arrived at dusk, stepping off a transport plane that smelled of oil and fear. He had read the briefing twice, and still didn't believe it. Millions of gallons of aviation fuel. Underground. Invisible. Undeniable. The Pacific War was bleeding America dry. Every carrier strike, every bomber mission, every desperate island hop consumed fuel faster than refineries could replace it. Japan knew this. They hunted tankers like wolves. So America buried its lifeline. Rourke was led down a narrow shaft, past sweating pipes and humming pumps. The air grew cooler. He realized then that this wasn't just infrastructure. It was a secret weapon. And if it failed, the Pacific would burn. The fortress was born from panic. In 1942, after Pearl Harbor, U.S. planners faced an impossible equation. Win a war across half the planet without losing the fuel that made movement possible. Tankers were vulnerable. Surface depots were targets. So engineers proposed madness. Dig it underground. Hide it inside the island itself. Thousands of workers arrived under false names. Blueprints were burned after memorization. Concrete was poured day and night. Ventilation shafts were disguised as palm clusters. The tanks, steel giants, were lowered piece by piece into caverns blasted from stone. Men died quietly. Accidents were erased. Letters home were censored into bland lies. Rourke read the logs and felt the weight of it all. This place wasn't just steel and fuel. It was a sacrifice sealed in rock. When the pumps first activated, fuel surged through veins no enemy could see. Carriers refueled faster. Bombers flew farther. The war shifted, subtly then decisively. And still, the island pretended to sleep. By 1943, American aircraft were striking where Japanese planners swore they could not reach. Rourke watched bomber crews walk toward planes that should have been grounded by distance alone. Instead, engines roared. Fuel never ran out. Submarines refueled in silence. Carriers vanished and reappeared. The Japanese noticed, but misread the signs. They blamed the new engines. Better pilots. Luck. They never suspected an island that wasn't on their maps. Then came the earthquake. A natural tremor cracked one of the underground tanks. Fuel seeped into the rock. Alarms screamed for the first time since construction. Rourke led the response himself, sealing valves while fumes burned his lungs. One spark would have erased the island. When the shaking stopped, the fortress held. That night, Rourke wrote a single line in his journal. The war now rests on what we cannot let the world see. As American forces pushed toward the Philippines, demand surged beyond design limits. Pumps overheated. Pipes screamed. The fortress was becoming a prisoner of its own success. Rourke argued for expansion, more tanks, deeper caverns. Washington hesitated. The secret was already enormous. Exposure risk grew with every drill bit. Then enemy reconnaissance planes appeared overhead. Camouflage teams worked frantically. Flights were rerouted. The island held its breath. And in the middle of that tension, as the future of the Pacific hung on buried steel and exhausted men. By the way, if you're clinging to this moment with me, make sure to hit subscribe, because what happens next nearly erased this place from history. The planes passed. The fortress survived another day. But Rourke knew the truth now. Secrets don't die quietly. Saboteurs came in rubber boats under moonless skies. They never reached the tanks, but they got close enough to remind everyone how fragile victory really was. Gunfire echoed. Fires burned above ground. Below, men waited beside valves that could drown the island in flame if breached. Rourke stood in darkness, hand on a cut-off switch that would flood entire chambers with seawater, destroying the fuel, saving the secret. The order never came. By dawn, the attackers were dead or gone. The fortress remained intact. But Rourke aged 10 years that night. WWII 1945, the fuel fortress was no longer a gamble. It was the backbone. From it flowed the fuel that carried bombers toward Japan itself. Missions launched that history would later describe as inevitable, but inevitability had been manufactured here, underground, by men who could never speak of it. When the war ended, Rourke received no medal. The island was sealed. Records were classified. The fortress returned to silence. Decades later, engineers reopened sections of the caverns. They found rusted tanks, old gauges, names scratched into concrete. The fuel fortress had never fired a shot. It never appeared in headlines. Yet it moved fleets. It extended ranges. It bent the Pacific to American reach. Rourke, old and nearly forgotten, once said quietly, "We didn't win because we had more planes. We won because they could always fly." And beneath an island most people will never name, the war still echoes in steel and stone.